La Vacker Ciniamas Damas, Guardati Kungi, Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung Draugi. Es esmo luoti priecīgs, ka varu jūs visus šovakar šeit sveicināt. Tere ortus austatu damit jeherat armsat Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung partnerit. Mulon vaga hea meel et san te tena ortul sintervitata. Tenan te Riga tulemast. Labas vakaras, gerbamos ponius irponi, mieli Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung drugei. Labei malonu, kad galju, jus shivakara, pas vecinti cha pas mus. Jecu visius kad advocati iriga. Meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, liebe Freundinnen und Freunde der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, es ist mir eine außerordentliche Freude, Sie heute Abend in Riga bei der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung begrüßen zu dürfen. Wir sind aus einem besonderen Anlass zusammengekommen und es freut mich sehr, dass Sie alle, die so unsere wichtigen und engen Partner sind, teils weite Wege in Kauf genommen haben, um den heutigen Abend mit uns zu verbringen. Wir möchten über ein Thema diskutieren, das uns allen sehr am Herzen liegt: der Zustand und die Zukunft Europas und wie sich diese Zukunft insbesondere aus Sicht der baltischen Staaten darstellt. Im Frühjahr diesen Jahres haben wir den 60. Jahrestag der römischen Verträge gefeiert und damit auch die Vision eines geeinten, friedlichen und freien, solidarischen Europas. Und in der Tat, in den vergangenen 60 Jahren ist vieles erreicht worden, vieles, was einst undenkbar schien. Und dennoch beobachten wir mit Sorge, dass die fortschreitende europäische Integration kein Selbstläufer mehr ist. Wir leben vielmehr in Zeiten des Brexit, in Zeiten des in einigen Ländern um sich greifenden Neoliberalismus und Neonationalismus und nationalen Egoismus, der die zwischenstaatliche Solidarität reduziert, und wir leben zudem in Zeiten einer immer instabiler werdenden geopolitischen Situation. Heute Abend wollen wir aber nicht nur die Probleme und Herausforderungen benennen, sondern wir möchten insbesondere auch nach Lösungen suchen. Und dabei eben natürlich auch die Mahnung von Willy Brandt im Gedächtnis haben, dass nichts von selbst kommt und wenig von Dauer ist. Damit aber die Europäische Union und die europäische Einigung von Dauer ist, hierzu versuchen wir alle, die wir heute in diesem Saal versammelt sind, einen Beitrag zu leisten. Und damit komme ich zum Anlass des heutigen Abends. Vor 25 Jahren begann die Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung mit ihrer Tätigkeit in den baltischen Staaten und versuchte damals wie heute beim Prozess des Zusammenwachsens eines friedlichen und geeinten Europas mitzuwirken. Es freut mich daher außerordentlich, dass heute Abend aus allen 3 baltischen Staaten wichtige Partner und Freunde der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung hier zusammengekommen sind, um gemeinsam über Europa nachzudenken, aber auch um die 25-jährige Tätigkeit der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung in Estland, Lettland und Litauen gemeinsam zu feiern. Es ist mir eine sehr große Freude, dass der Vorsitzende der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, der Ministerpräsident AD, Kurt Beck, sowie der Geschäftsführer der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, Dr. Roland Schmidt, aus diesem Anlass ebenfalls nach Riga gekommen sind. Zugleich sind wir die zuständigen Abteilungs- und Referatsleitungen, Dr. Alexander Kalweit und Matthias Sobelius, gleichsam die gesamte FES-Kompetenz nicht nur für die baltischen Staaten, sondern für ganz Europa hier anwesend. Nehmen Sie das, liebe Gäste und Freunde, bitte auch als ein Zeichen, wie wichtig der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung die baltischen Staaten sind und die internationale Zusammenarbeit mit ihnen. Ich vermute, dass dies unter anderem auch Gegenstand der Festrede von Kurt Beck sein wird, dem Vorsitzenden der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, dem ich hiermit das Wort übergeben möchte.
Vielen herzlichen Dank, lieber Tobias Mörschel, für diese freundliche Begrüßung. Vielen herzlichen Dank und ein herzliches Willkommen auch namens der Delegation der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, die mich begleitet, an Sie alle. Frau Präsidentin, verehrter Herr Minister, verehrte Herren des diplomatischen Korps, verehrte Botschafter, verehrte Damen und Herren Abgeordnete und Repräsentantinnen und Repräsentanten von Lettland, Litauen und Estland. Zunächst will ich Ihnen allen danken. Danken dafür, dass wir hier in Ihren Ländern arbeiten dürfen, dass wir hier Gast sein dürfen. Danken aber auch dafür, was Sie alles in die internationale Bewegung zu freiheitlichen, demokratischen Entwicklungen in Europa und der Welt beigetragen haben. Sie können davon ausgehen, dass es nicht nur bei uns in der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, sondern in weiten Teilen der Bevölkerung in Deutschland, in Europa und darüber hinaus im Bewusstsein bleibt, wie sehr die baltischen Völker Beiträge geleistet haben, um Freiheit und Unabhängigkeit, um Demokratie und Eigenverantwortung erreichen zu können. Es bleibt uns in Erinnerung, wie sie seit den 80er Jahren noch zu Sowjetunion-Zeiten Zeichen gesetzt haben, aus dem Volk heraus, aus den einzelnen Völkern heraus, hinzuwollen zu Unabhängigkeit und Freiheit. Und es bleibt natürlich in ganz besonderer Erinnerung, wie sie, bevor dieser Schritt erreicht werden konnte, Anfang der 90er Jahre mit besonders kreativen und friedlichen Formen des Protestes Schritte hin zur Demokratie, Unabhängigkeit und Freiheit errungen haben. Wenn man an das, was unter dem Stichwort Kalenderdemonstrationen geführt wird, sich in Erinnerung ruft, dann kann man nur sagen, eine besonders kreative Form, geschichtliche Ereignisse zu nutzen, um Zukunftsforderungen daran festzumachen. Wenn man daran denkt, dass die sprichwörtliche besondere Fähigkeit in den baltischen Gesellschaften, sich gesanglich auszudrücken, genutzt worden ist, eben nicht nur um Freude miteinander zu haben, wie das heute noch häufig der Fall ist, sondern genutzt worden ist, um Zeichen zu setzen. Oder wenn man daran denkt, dass es geradezu eine unglaubliche, auch logistische Leistung gewesen sein muss, eine Menschenkette zwischen den 3 Hauptstädten zu bilden und damit etwas zu zeigen, was, glaube ich, weltweit in dieser Dimension bisher nie mehr erreicht worden ist. Diese Zeichen mit einem guten Ergebnis, diese Zeichen sind, glaube ich, auch bedeutend über diese Region, über die Überwindung der sowjetischen Hegemonie hinaus, weil sie signalisieren, mit friedlichem Protest kann man sehr viel erreichen. Und das, glaube ich, ist ein politisch-kulturelles Erbe, das in die Welt hinaus strahlt. Daran will ich heute Abend erinnern dürfen. Dass uns dieses Ringen um Demokratie und Freiheit in besonderer Weise auch als Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung angesprochen hat, das ist wohl wahr. Und das auch deshalb, weil in unserer Geschichte, der Geschichte der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, die über 90 Jahre währt, solche Kämpfe, solches Ringen um Demokratie und Freiheit Pate gestanden hat für unsere Arbeit und die politischen Freunde, die Gesinnungsfreundinnen und Freunde, die für eine freiheitliche, soziale Demokratie gekämpft haben. Und so ist Entlang dieses besonderen Beispiels, das Sie gegeben haben, eben auch fast selbstverständlich gewesen für meine Vorgänger, dass entschieden worden ist, sobald wir vertragliche Beziehungen aufbauen konnten, werden wir in den 3 Hauptstädten der baltischen Staaten auch präsent sein als Stiftung und versuchen einmal zu zeigen, wie solidarisch wir mit den Menschen sind, aber zum Zweiten auch unseren Beitrag zu leisten, in aller Bescheidenheit, aber doch unseren Beitrag zu leisten, um diesen Weg zur Demokratie und in gefestigte Gesellschaften zu begleiten und zugleich einen Beitrag zu unterstützen zum Weg in die europäische Gemeinschaft und in die Gemeinschaft der freien Völker dieser Welt, was sich nicht zuletzt in der gemeinsamen Mitgliedschaft im Nordatlantischen Verteidigungspakt manifestiert. Diese Idee zu unterstützen, wie gesagt, das hat etwas mit unserer eigenen Geschichte und Erfahrung zu tun, denn die erste Demokratie auf deutschem Boden musste auch furchtbar errungen werden vor dem Hintergrund des Ersten Weltkriegs. Und der erste Reichspräsident in Deutschland, Friedrich-Ebert, unser Namensgeber und Stifter, der ist von den undemokratischen Kräften in dieser Zeit der ersten Demokratie ja geradezu in Krankheit und Tod gejagt worden. Und das Ergebnis war ein entsetzliches, nämlich die Nazidiktatur und ein Unrechtsstaat, wie ihn die Welt seither nicht mehr erlebt hat, mit Mord und Totschlag, nicht nur in Deutschland, sondern auch an vielen Stellen in der Welt. Und wenn man an die jüdischen Bevölkerungen in ihren Ländern denkt, eben auch hier. Und dass das Ganze in einem Krieg münden musste, haben damals viele gesagt, die unsere Ideen versucht haben, lebendig zu halten. Aber im Wahn des Nationalen, der Selbstüberhöhung, ist das weggespült worden. Und am Ende haben wir als Deutsche ungeheure Schuld auf uns geladen. Diese Erfahrungen werden wir nie vergessen und wir werden auch nicht zulassen, dass sie verleugnet werden, weder in Deutschland noch anderswo von Rechtspopulisten oder Rechtsradikalen. Und diese Verpflichtung dann immer wieder aufzunehmen, sie nach 1945 eben wieder in gestalterische Arbeit umzusetzen, dem hat sich unsere Stiftung, und nach diesem Vorbild sind in Deutschland dann entlang der politischen Ideen auch anderen Parteien nahestehende Stiftungen ins Leben gerufen worden. Und eins eint uns, bei manchen Unterschieden hinsichtlich der Ausprägung von Politik, aber eins eint uns, nämlich für Frieden, Freiheit und Demokratie in unserem Land, aber eben auch in Europa und weltweit einzutreten. Und vor diesem Hintergrund war es, ich wiederhole es gerne, ja, ein Selbstverständnis für uns, damals hier zu sein, wenn Neues aufgebaut wird. Und dafür, dass wir das durften und können und weiter heute miteinander in Freundschaft und Offenheit arbeiten dürfen, wollen wir heute Abend bei dieser Begegnung danken. Wir wollen aber auch den Blick natürlich nach vorne richten, auf die kommenden Jahre und Jahrzehnte. Und wir werden uns, und ich bin glücklich darüber, dass das für die Letten, die Litauer, für Estland gleichermaßen gilt, wie wir aus allen Gesprächen und Erfahrungen wissen. Wir wollen miteinander diesem Europa eine Zukunft geben, eine Zukunft, die getragen wird und gebaut ist auf die Unterstützung und Zustimmung unserer Völker. Und von einem können Sie mit absoluter Sicherheit ausgehen, nämlich, dass die tragenden politischen Kräfte in Deutschland über Parteigrenzen hinweg dieses Bekenntnis zu Europa und damit zu einer friedlichen, einer freiheitlichen und einer dem Wohlstand der Menschen auch zugewandten Organisationsform des Zusammenlebens auf diesem kleinen Kontinent, dass wir uns dieser Aufgabe verpflichtet wissen und dass das auch Konsens ist und wie immer die Regierungsbildung nach der Bundestagswahl am vergangenen Sonntag ausfallen wird in Deutschland. Die wichtigen politischen Kräfte werden an dieser europäischen Idee festhalten und sich nicht irre machen lassen. Das ist mir wichtig, es hier auch zu sagen, dass Deutschland in diesem Sinne ein verlässlicher Partner bleibt für ihre Länder, aber auch für alle anderen in Europa und darüber hinaus. Berechenbar und klar orientiert. Wie immer man zu einzelnen Fragen der politischen Ausgestaltung, auch im Diskurs, im politischen Disput sich äußert, dieser Weg des Miteinander, einer Orientierung der europäischen Völker an Frieden, ich wiederhole es bewusst, Freiheit und an dem Willen, möglichst viel Wohlstand für die Menschen zu schaffen und zu ermöglichen, wird festgehalten. Und wir Deutschen haben, so wie Sie sich Ihre Freiheit miterrungen haben, erleben dürfen, dass in dem Teil Deutschlands, der auch unter sowjetischer Hegemonie stand, die Menschen auch in den Jahren 1989 folgende sich Freiheit erkämpft haben, friedlich auf die Straße gegangen sind und die Mauer, die Deutschland getrennt hat und die Stacheldrahte, die Europa zerrissen haben, eingerissen haben. Gott sei Dank ohne Blutvergießen und Gott sei Dank ohne dass Waffen gesprochen haben. Und diese gemeinsame Erfahrung, auch die, glaube ich, stellt eine belastbare Brücke für einen Interessensausgleich in der Politik zwischen vielen Völkern auf dieser Welt, aber in jedem Fall zwischen ihren Völkern und Deutschland dar. Und allein aus dieser Verpflichtung, aber auch mit Blick auf die auf die deutsche Geschichte und unsere gemeinsame Geschichte in Europa, war es für uns von großer Bedeutung, dass wir selber aufgenommen worden sind 1945 und dann wieder 1991, als die Wiedervereinigung Deutschland offiziell greifen konnte, dass wir wieder aufgenommen worden sind in die Gesellschaft der freien Völker dieser Welt. Wenn man aber diese Solidarität in Anspruch nimmt, dann hat man, das ist die andere Seite der gleichen Medaille, eben auch Solidarität zu geben. Das gilt für die europäische Idee, es gilt aber auch für die Sicherheit und für die Garantie der Freiheit, die wir versuchen gemeinsam im Nordatlantischen Verteidigungspakt zum Ausdruck zu bringen. Und auch an dieser Stelle will ich mit vollster Überzeugung und wissend aus vielen, vielen Gesprächen mit Demokratinnen und Demokraten über alle Parteigrenzen hinweg, auch all denen, die heute und morgen in Verantwortung sein werden in Deutschland, es wird so bleiben, dass Deutschland auch bezüglich der NATO-Mitgliedschaft und der Garantie der NATO für alle ihre Mitgliedstaaten gemeinsam gerade zu stehen für Freiheit und Demokratie. Diese Überzeugung wird lebendig bleiben und sie wird nicht in Frage gestellt werden. Dass man es betonen muss, verstehe ich gerade hier in ganz besonderer Weise, weil manche Töne, die man gehört hat aus Übersee, ob denn die NATO nicht ein veraltetes Denk- und Werk und Instrumentarium sei, gerade danach muss man wieder deutlich machen, wir wissen um geschichtliche Erfahrungen, die Völker gemacht haben, die gerade auch ihre Völker machen mussten, und wir wissen, dass daraus auch ein besonderes Bedürfnis resultiert, Solidarität als lebendig, als nicht endend, sondern fortzusetzen begriffen wird. Und deshalb will ich auch an dieser Stelle sagen, dass Sie sicher sein können, dass wir an diesen Stellen, ob unsere Partei, die uns nahestehende Partei, die Sozialdemokratie, in Regierung oder in Opposition sein wird, an diesen elementaren Orientierungen EU, NATO-Mitgliedschaft, Partnerschaftlichkeit über nationale Grenzen hinweg, friedliche Lösungen von Konflikten, an diesen Grundorientierungen wird sich nichts verändern. Uns bedrückt, ähnlich wie Sie wahrscheinlich auch, dass wir erleben müssen, dass populistische bis extremistische Kräfte in ein deutsches Parlament einziehen. Das ist auch nicht schön, wenn es anderswo in der Welt oder in Europa so ist. Aber vor dem Hintergrund der deutschen Geschichte empfinde ich es immer als besonders herausfordernd, diesen Entwicklungen mit Argumenten, mit Überzeugungsarbeit entgegenzutreten. Der heutige Bundespräsident, der Ihr Land ja eine Woche lang besucht hat, und ich weiß von ihm, dass das keine zufällige Entscheidung war, zu sagen, eine meiner längsten Auslandsreisen mache ich nach Estland, Lettland und Litauen. Der heutige Bundespräsident hat noch in seiner Zeit als Außenminister den Satz formuliert, dass die Welt aus den Fugen zu geraten scheint. Und wenn man an bestimmte Aussagen und Entwicklungen in der Türkei denkt, wenn man auch an Verwerfungen hinsichtlich der rechtsstaatlichen Orientierung in manchem europäischen Mitgliedstaat denkt, wenn man sieht, was sich um Nordkorea abspielt, was im nördlichen Afrika und in Teilen Asiens an Schrecklichem abgeht, was an Terror über die Welt gebracht wird, aber wenn man auch erlebt, wie manch irritierende Aussage von der amerikanischen Präsidentschaft kommt, dann kann man diese Sorge sehr gut nachvollziehen. Aber in dieser Entwicklung, und ich beziehe den Brexit ausdrücklich in diese Unsicherheit, ich bin überzeugt, als Fehlentscheidung einer knappen Mehrheit des britischen Volkes mit in diese Betrachtung ein. Aber vor diesem Hintergrund gibt es gerade keine Begründung dafür, dass wir unsere Bemühungen, Europa zusammenzuführen, auch wenn es dann 27 und nicht mehr 28 Staaten sein werden, sondern der gegenteilige Schluss, glaube ich, muss gezogen werden, gerade erst recht. Und ich konnte Ihnen, verehrte Frau Präsidentin, Ihnen, Herr Außenminister, gerade dankenswerterweise auch in einem persönlichen Gespräch davon berichten, dass die Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung vor 2 Jahren und jetzt wieder in den letzten Monaten europaweit eine sehr groß angelegte Umfrage gemacht hat, um zu erkunden, wie stehen denn die Bürgerinnen und Bürger in Europa zu dieser europäischen Zukunft. Und vor 2 Jahren waren wir fast geschockt von den Ergebnissen, weil 2 von 3 Bürgern sich negativ, ablehnend, teilweise bis zu feindselig zu Europa und seinen Institutionen geäußert hatte. Und wir hatten einige Sorge, einiges Bauchgrimmen, als wir diese Umfrage wieder in Auftrag gegeben haben. Aber ich kann Ihnen berichten, gerade vor dem Hintergrund der Herausforderung, America First auf der einen Seite, Brexit statt Europa stärker zu machen auf der anderen Seite, hat es offensichtlich einen Nachdenkprozess gegeben bei ganz, ganz vielen Menschen. Und wir haben eine Umkehr der Zuwendung zu den europäischen Grundideen. 2 von 3 Menschen in Europa sagen heute, wir brauchen und wir wollen dieses Europa. Eine genaue Umkehrung zum Positiven hin. Eine unglaubliche Chance. Aber wir sind auch gefordert, aus dieser Chance etwas zu machen. Denn die Bürger sagen nicht, es ist alles gut und schön mit Europa. Sie sagen aber, wir setzen unsere Hoffnung auf Europa und nicht auf nationale oder gar nationalistische Antworten. Aber Europa muss auch etwas tun. Zentrale Themen sind gemeinsam stärker eine Stimme finden, wenn es um internationale Entwicklungen geht, wenn es um Fragen der Friedenssicherung geht, um Fragen der Terrorbekämpfung geht, etc. Auch um Fragen der Flüchtlingsbewegungen, die wir ja weltweit in gigantischem Maße haben, nicht nur nach Europa. Und ein zweiter Punkt, der dort herausgestellt wird, und auch das müssen wir sehr ernst nehmen, die Menschen erwarten, dass alles Mögliche getan wird, dass sich die Wirtschaftskrise 2008 folgende nicht einfach wiederholen kann, weil wir nicht ausreichend Vorsorge treffen, um Finanzspekulationen, die keinen realen wirtschaftlichen Hintergrund haben, zu unterbinden und damit nicht wieder eine Situation herbeizuführen, wie wir sie bei Ihnen teilweise, aber bei uns in Deutschland auch ganz stark erleben mussten, dass mit Milliardenbeträgen die einfachen Leute am Ende gerade stehen mussten für absolute Fehlspekulationen, die aus Geldgier heraus und ohne wirtschaftlichen Sachverstand und Verantwortung vorgekommen waren. Da wird erwartet, dass Europa handelt. Und ich habe mich und will es gerne noch einmal öffentlich tun, bei der estnischen Präsidentschaft bedankt. Denn in dieser Zeit dieser besonderen Unsicherheit, um noch einmal Frank-Walter Steinmeier mit einzubeziehen und seine Aussage, in dieser Zeit aktiv gestaltend in der Präsidentschaft neue Schritte zu gehen, Stichwort Digitalisierung und vieles andere mehr, das ist etwas, was wir brauchen. Nicht innehalten, den Kopf einziehen, uns wegducken, sondern zeigen, dass dieses Europa in wichtigen Feldern handlungsfähig ist und sich vorwärts bewegt und nicht nur darauf wartet, wie denn jetzt die Brexit-Verhandlungen ausgehen und bis dahin sozusagen Stillstand sich verordnen. Und Ähnliches kann man auch, was Erwartungen angeht, im Übrigen von der sozialen Dimension des Zusammenlebens in Europa sagen. Es gibt, das gilt in besonderer Weise für die Staaten Südeuropas, Riesensorge, und ich finde begründet, um die Tatsache, dass dort 30, 40, manchmal mehr Prozent der jungen Leute ohne Beruf und ohne Ausbildung sind. Auch dort wird erwartet, dass in diesem Sinne nicht einer Vergemeinschaftung der Sozialpolitik, aber dass in diesem Sinne eine solidarische Politik miteinander gemacht wird und nicht einfach hingenommen wird, dass da große Teile einer Generation verloren gehen, ohne Perspektive in die Zukunft hineingeschickt werden. Über ökologische Fragen wird auch viel erwartet von Europa, insbesondere was die Positionierung gegenüber anderen angeht, die den Klimawandel leugnen und Ähnliches mehr. Also es ist nicht so, dass wir sagen können, ja prima, jetzt stimmen ja 2/3 der Bürgerinnen und Bürger Europas wieder der europäischen Idee zu, dann können wir uns zurücklehnen. Nein, es sind Hoffnungen, es sind Erwartungen. Aber als diese europäische Gemeinschaft ins Leben gerufen worden ist, da waren es auch Hoffnungen und Erwartungen, die eben Pate gestanden haben. Und als sie selber, als ihre Völker eine Entscheidung getroffen haben, mit überwältigenden Mehrheiten dieser europäischen Gemeinschaft beizutreten, da waren es auch Hoffnungen und Erwartungen, die Pate gestanden haben. Und jetzt müssen wir gemeinsam die heutigen und für die Zukunft geltenden Hoffnungen und Erwartungen versuchen, miteinander gestalterisch aufzunehmen und anzugehen. Und ich freue mich darüber, dass wir heute Abend in höchst kompetenter Weise über diese Fragen in einer Podiumsrunde nachher reden können. Danke dafür, und die Podiumsteilnehmerinnen und Teilnehmer werden ausführlich noch einmal vorgestellt werden. Aber ich will abschließend noch einmal sagen, wir, Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, danken für Gastfreundschaft und Gastlichkeit. Wir, die Deutschen, wird der Botschafter, ich darf das sicher so formulieren, danken für freundschaftliches Miteinander unserer jeweiligen Völker. Und ich will auch die Gelegenheit nutzen, den heutigen Mitarbeiterinnen und Mitarbeitern, früheren Mitarbeitern unserer Stiftung hier in den baltischen Staaten Anerkennung zu sagen für das. Und man spürt es, wenn man jetzt hier ist, was an Vertrauen und an guten Begegnungen aufgebaut und gepflegt wird. In diesem Sinne bin ich zuversichtlich, dass wir den Menschen unserer Völker begegnen können und ihnen sagen, nein, es wird nicht leicht in Zeiten dieser weltweiten Verwerfungen. Es wird nicht leicht vor dem Hintergrund der ökologischen riesigen Herausforderungen. Es wird nicht einfach, menschengerecht die digitale Entwicklung weder aufzuhalten oder stoppen zu wollen, aber auf der anderen Seite sie auch menschengerecht zu gestalten. Das alles werden große Aufgaben sein. Aber diejenigen, die an der Schwelle zu völlig neuen geschichtlichen Entwicklungen, wie Sie es erlebt haben 1991, wie wir es 1991 erlebt haben mit der deutschen Einheit und noch mehr, wie wir es erlebt haben nach 1945. Diejenigen, die damals neu angefangen haben, standen vor unendlich größeren Herausforderungen, und deshalb, da wir uns nicht schämen wollen gegenüber unseren eigenen Müttern und Vätern und Großmüttern und Großvätern mit unseren Leistungen in unserer Zeit, wollen wir es miteinander anpacken in Solidarität und Freundschaft und in Verlässlichkeit gegeneinander. Schön, dass Sie da sind. Danke, dass wir da sein dürfen.
Ja, lieber Kurt Beck, ganz herzlichen Dank für diese grundsätzliche Verortung auch schon mal auch der deutschen Außenpolitik, der deutschen Perspektive auf Europa und das Anbringen von vielen großen Fragen bezogen auf die zukünftige Ausgestaltung der Herausforderungen, vor denen Europa steht. Wir werden versuchen, einige Bälle jetzt auch aufzunehmen, die du uns in den Raum gespielt hast, und versuchen, diese Stärken nun auch noch eine Perspektive aus den baltischen Staaten zu ergänzen. Und es freut mich sehr, dass wir ein hochkarätiges Podium mit Vertreterinnen und einem Vertreter aus allen 3 baltischen Staaten zusammenstellen konnten für den heutigen Abend. Ich werde die Person nur sehr kurz vorstellen. Jeder im Raum kennt Madame Präsident Vike-Freiberga. Sie war Präsidentin Lettlands gewesen von 1999 bis zum Jahr 2007. Ich glaube, ihre Verdienste sind allen im Raum bekannt. Deswegen verzeihen Sie mir, wenn ich Sie nur so kurz vorstelle. Wir freuen uns sehr, Frau Präsident, dass Sie da sind. Ganz herzlich begrüßen möchte ich den Außenminister von Estland, Sven Mikser, der in sehr arbeitsintensiven Zeiten, Kurt Beck hat es gesagt, die Ratspräsidentschaft ist in estnischen Händen. Es gibt viel zu tun. Heute Abend an sich ein großes Treffen, morgen der Digitalgipfel. Sven Mikser, ganz herzlichen Dank, dass Sie trotz dieser hohen Arbeitsbelastung zu uns heute Abend gekommen sind. Und die dritte im Bunde ist Agne Goldbergaite. Sie ist die Vorsitzende der sozialdemokratischen Jugendvereinigung in Litauen. Sie vertritt den kurzfristig verhinderten Parteivorsitzenden der Sozialdemokraten Gintautas Paluckas. Sie haben vielleicht mitbekommen, dass die Sozialdemokraten in Litauen etwas in Bewegung sind seit vergangenen Wochenende. Diese Bewegungen und Gärungen, die momentan dort stattfinden, haben natürlich verständlicherweise eine Anwesenheit heute hier nicht möglich gemacht. Es freut mich aber sehr, dass wir mit Agne eine Person haben, die, glaube ich, das hervorragend auch machen wird. Und vor allen Dingen freut es mich auch, dass wir auf diesem Panel nun 3 Personen haben werden, sozusagen nicht nur aus den 3 baltischen Staaten, sondern eben auch aus 3 Generationen und aus unterschiedlichen Verantwortungs- und Politikbereichen. So, now I'm going to switch into English. Madam President, Minister Agne. Okay, Madam President, I would like to start to address the first question to you. During your presidency, Latvia joined the European Union together with Estonia and Lithuania and many other Eastern European countries. You've been a key person leading Latvia into the EU. The Baltic states are now member states of the European Union for 13 years. If you compare from a Latvian perspective, the expectations you and hopes you had when joining the EU with the reality today, in which aspects are you disappointed? Where did your hopes become reality? And what I would also like to know, what did surprise you?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, I think as far as surprise goes, the world has something in reserve for us practically every day of the week. And the best we can hope is that when we look at these surprises, some of them are comical and some of them are tragic, but hopefully none will be as dangerous as so many of the events in the past that my parents' generation and those before them had to go through during the last 100 years. Latvia will be celebrating its 100th birthday next year in November, on November 18th. And during those 100 years, we have not had the independent republic that was founded in 1918. In fact, we didn't even have it at the moment of declaring our independence. Latvia still had 2 years of fighting to gain control over its territory. Only 20 years later, it lost that control. First Soviet occupation, the German occupation, the return of the Soviet Union annexation, and the long half-century under Soviet rule. So as much of Eastern Europe, we have a history that's been cut in slices, like a multi-layered cake. Periods, 19th century, which all over Europe saw a movement of many nations searching for their own national identity and feeling that a national state would be the best form of expression of their hopes and desires and their sense of unity as a nation or as a people. This is why we saw the birth of so many new nations after the First World War. But the First World War, as we well know, planted the seeds of the conflicts of the Second, and the end of the Second World War gave freedom, democracy, Wirtschaftswunder, and economic growth and development to half of Europe, but stagnation and communist totalitarianism to the other half. So when Herr Beck was talking about the past and the ability of the 3 Baltic nations to join hands, back on the day when we were trying to attract the world's attention to the hopes and aspirations of these three nations, the expectations were extremely high. People were very much ready to sort of lose their lives in the name of freedom, but at the same time as they were ready to sacrifice all, they had very high expectations of what would happen. And the first years naturally were disappointing in the sense that a transition such as we went through had to be difficult, and there had to be a social and economic cost to it, and many felt it very keenly. When we joined on 1st of May 2004, I remember the ceremony, I was there, and it was on Dome Square, and it was packed with people, young and old. And they had balloons that we released at the moment of announcing from now on Latvia belongs to the European Union. And of course it was a simple accomplishment of, as we called it, returning to Europe where we always felt we belong, unlike Mrs. May, who told us a few days ago that we, the Brits, we have never felt comfortable in the European Union. We really never felt at home, poor things. Especially since she's speaking only for, well, at best, half of the British population. She may have felt that way, but surely not every Brit, certainly not the ones I just spoke to when I was on a trip to London just a few days ago. So the feelings about Europe they're very contextual, you see. It depends on the context and from which perspective you're looking. For a nation that had been behind the Iron Curtain for half a century, 1st of May 2004 was an affirmation of our liberation from totalitarianism, from foreign occupation, from exclusion from the European family to which we felt historically and geographically we naturally belong. That people had expectations, and very high expectations, undoubtedly so, and that a number of them were disappointed. That is true as well, because unfortunately the economic crisis of 2008 was a very, very nasty event, which I think broke the faith of many people in the free market economy, in the financial system that rules in the world, and I think rightly so. I think the financial systems, the way they were being run, definitely need looking over and improvements and serious change, and some of it has been put in place and some still needs to be done. But of course, people also thought that with the fall of the Berlin Wall, with the disappearance of the Iron Curtain, all of a sudden we would all magically be at the same level of economic comfort and revenue. This could not realistically happen. Necessarily, it has taken time, and it will take time for the equalization between Eastern and Western Europe to really become a fact. Much as we saw with the Greek crisis, that there is also a divide between North and South. And that too, that is a gap that needs to be filled. So that, in one word, I would say that our dreams, it was a fulfillment of our dreams to join Europe. At the same time, of course, it was an opportunity to dream, as the French say, in color, and to dream in technicolor, to dream in rainbow colors, and to dream of all our hopes and dreams coming true very quickly. Tomorrow as breakfast time, as we Latvians say. And it can't happen. So naturally, we have to come down to earth, to be more realistic, I think Europe in many ways has gone through these waves as well, of great hope, enthusiasm, idealism, then a fall back to realism, selfishness, self-centeredness, negativity rather than positivity, and so on. Hopefully, as the waves of the sea go up and down, so I hope that the opinions that we heard from Dr. Beck, the opinions will continue to be open to conviction and to persuasion by both far-sighted politicians, by far-sighted NGO leaders and workers, and by well-informed and well-meaning citizens of every country in Europe.
Thank you very much, Madam President. You spoke about the high expectations which were existing. You spoke about the fulfillment of many dreams which not all became reality. And maybe I want to address this question also to you, Minister. From an Estonian perspective, in what respect did Estonia change by becoming a member of the European Union?
Well, Estonia has changed a lot. I mean, we've been now members of the European Union for more than a dozen years, and obviously any country changes during that amount of time. I think that when you think of the changes that have happened in Germany, in the UK, in France since 2004, they are no less monumental than the changes you can see here in Estonia, here in Latvia, or in Estonia, or in Lithuania. But obviously, I mean, the membership in the European Union, as well as in NATO, has made a whole lot of difference, and obviously the changes that would have happened had we not taken the decision to join would have been dramatically different than the ones that we have seen in those countries as member states of the European Union. Well, our former president, former Estonian president Toomas Ilves, was once asked in an interview as to when did Estonia take the decision to join the EU and NATO, and he said that, well, probably back in 1939, which is true. I mean, obviously that was a particularly painful moment in our history. And one that basically, I think, it was a sort of culmination point of very dramatic and tragic developments that happened all over Europe during the preceding 2 decades. And I think that back then it should have been very clear to all sort of liberal-minded people in Europe what we should have done differently in the aftermath of the First World War. Madam President referred to the Second World War as the continuation war of the First World War. I think that we should be able to learn from history, and in fact, during one of my visits to Washington, D.C., one of my American interlocutors told me that well, it's only in America that when you say that's history, it means that's not important. Just recently, one of my European EU colleagues told a gathering of ministers that well, in Europe we tend to produce more history than we can successfully consume. I think this is very much true, and the whole European project is actually one that whose aim is to help us to live together with all that baggage of history without hurting each other and ourselves. And I think that this is what we have been. This is where we have been actually much more successful than we could have ever dreamt of. I think that the whole of European continent, well, obviously, I mean, if you were to ask me as to whether all my expectations were fulfilled, well, I never expected European Union to be perfect, but obviously it's far better than any alternative scenario. So I'm very much confident and full confidence. Actually, when you go back to the moment of the Brexit vote, the morning after the Brexit vote, there were all sorts of nightmare scenarios floated in many circles. Well, basically, some people were saying that now the Eurosceptical voices, Eurosceptical forces on the European continent will get an enormous boost out of this result. And others were saying that, well, the British voters basically told you or said to European institutions that well, they need to dramatically reform in order for the EU to survive. I would actually say that the result of the Brexit vote told much more about the condition of the UK than it did about the condition of Europe, in many ways, and indeed, well, I would say that perhaps Prime Minister May was not quite so not quite insincere when she said that the British had never learned to live with Europe. When you go back to early 1970s, when the British decided to join the European Union, the then Prime Minister Ted Heath actually didn't have well, never had a referendum in first place, but didn't have sufficient number of votes in the Parliament from his own party members, Conservative Party members. So he actually had to turn to a part of the Labour opposition to get the votes required for him to take the country into the European Union. And I think that there has been a sort of Eurosceptical sentiment in the UK throughout that period of time, particularly in the Conservative Party. Obviously, it was a gamble to bring that issue to the referendum. The Prime Minister Cameron never expected the referendum to deliver the result that it did. But with the hindsight, perhaps it was not that surprising. But I think that the message that we now get, well, these initial fears about the future of Europe have to a degree subsided since the referendum, partly because I think the British Eurosceptics, who I think were not quite so sinister when you think of their motivations, at least not all of them, as some of continental European Eurosceptics are, but they basically have been exposed as having campaigned on well, not entirely a sincere and truthful platform, but also because people on the continent have had time to reflect as to what they have to lose should the European Union collapse. So I think that we are in a better state today than we were perhaps on the morning of June the 24th, a bit more than a year ago.
Thanks a lot. I want to bring in Agne in our discussion. We heard about dreams, we heard about being realistic, we heard about chances. Agne, you are also as a representative of the younger generation. What expectations do you have regarding the EU? What hopes do you have regarding the EU?
Well, good evening, everyone. And first of all, I would like to say that I'm very honored to be seated at this panel. And speaking about EU, right, and speaking about expectations, and I think that the older generation of Lithuania, my parents' generation in Lithuania, can see how much EU changed the lives throughout looking at us, how as a younger generation can live in Europe, comparing how young days were when they were young, right? And they see us being mobile in the labor market, being mobile in education, getting us information that we want in a matter of the seconds, and we can travel all around Europe using one currency. And and then us, young people, right? We expect that the EU will just continue keeping us united. For example, right now, a young person in Lithuania, a young person in Latvia, or I'm sure in Estonia, we do identify us as Lithuanian or Estonians and Latvians, but we identify us as EU citizens. And we're hoping that this will continue, that the EU will continue holding us together and letting us to achieve our goals no matter where we want to live, no matter what we want to do, because we believe that EU offers the tools that will let us achieve our goals.
Well, you said a key concern is being united, but I want to come back. Maybe there also exist some disappointments. We are looking at Lithuania, but also to Latvia and a little bit to Estonia. Many young people are leaving the countries. Maybe EU is a chance to leave the country because you can get abroad, you can work abroad without any problems, but what has the EU to do that the young people won't leave their countries? Is it also a failure of EU that the people have to leave their country, that they have no perspective to work in Lithuania, for example?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. If we would know the answer to it, then the young people wouldn't leave Lithuania, right? But I think that the problems that young people are encountering in our country isn't about the EU. They don't identify as the EU, we joined the EU and now all these problems became, well, you know, we'll live in the 21st century and to expect that there's not going to be any problems whatsoever, it's silly, but it's the matter of young people identifying the upcoming problems with EU or with the country they live in. And I'm sure young people, at least in my country, they don't identify EU as a problem of the reason why they're leaving the country. I think they identifying EU as a possibility to live better somewhere abroad and perhaps to come back.
The motto the EU gave itself was, Europe is united in diversity. Is Europe still united in diversity, or, Madam President, is it rather united in crisis? We heard of so many crises.
Well, you see, I think it's human nature to wish to live in what might be called a state of stasis. In a state of complete, unchanged, undiluted tranquility and bliss. And sadly or gladly, the world is not built that way. Everything goes in cycles. Everything changes. The ancient Greeks already emphasized that, and every philosopher in every part of the world has understood that the world is constantly changing, and the resistance to change, the anxiety in front of change, I think is often exaggerated. People, for instance, I think in the American questionnaires that have been given to the largest number of people, one of the questions has been, what is your biggest fear? Now, I'm not sure what the biggest fear of Europeans is. I wonder what this audience would say. You know, if I ask you, what is your biggest fear? What would it be? War, you see? In Europe, that is the sort of thing that comes to mind. Do you know what the Americans fear the most? Public speaking. And what does it mean? It means a certain insecurity of who you are as a person, a feeling that you're going to be criticized, you're going to be open to scrutiny, you are going to feel, as the French say, pas dans votre assiette, you see, not well in your skin, because you're not perfect. And I think we frequently think about the European Union also as something that should be perfect. And that's not presentable to the world until it's perfect. When I was president, I got a letter from a young man who was working in Spain. And he said, Madam President, I understand you're a very energetic woman, and I'm letting you know that I'm sitting here in Spain, waiting for you to put Latvia in shape and to get everything arranged properly. And then when you have done that, let me know, and I will come back to Latvia. Well, I wrote back to him and I said, that's very sweet of you. We naturally will happily receive you back anytime you decide to come. But do consider the possibility that the changes that you would like to see in our country might benefit from your contribution and from your presence as well. If we expect somebody else to do the job for us, we can sometimes wait for a very long time. And I think the greatest satisfaction for the Baltic countries actually has been the satisfaction of seeing what they could accomplish in so brief a time. I travel across the world, and so many people in many parts and different continents tell us, aren't you lucky to be where you are, as if we had some magical privilege of where we are in Europe and you managed to join the European Union. Actually, geography has been our biggest enemy since Pope Innocent III decided to start a holy war against the last pagans in Europe in 1199. But people in Central Asia or in Africa think that, you know, just being in Europe is already a privilege. And it is for those poor people who try to cross the Mediterranean and frequently lose their lives at it. So yes, we are privileged. I think one of the problems with Europeans is that they have lost a sense of perspective about how privileged they really are. Because again, when you live in peace and contentment, and your only worry is to see what is the it bag for this season, or what is the it watch, the most expensive watch that the gentleman should be wearing to show that they are successful in life and will be attractive to the ladies. I think that the sense of perspective that history gives us, but I would like to see not just young people in Europe continuing on the Erasmus program and studying abroad and living in different countries, but the European Peace Corps, or the American Peace Corps, forgive me, was an excellent idea, because when you go to countries that truly are experiencing difficulties, and where the life expectancy and the kind of expectancies of the average citizen are very, very dim and grim, then when you come back to Europe, I think you will kiss the ground and say how happy I am to come back here, and how happy I am to be a European, whichever part of Europe you belong to.
We've heard a lot about the crisis. We spoke about the expectation and hopes. Minister, Estonia is holding the EU presidency, and right at the moment the head of governments and states are gathered in Tallinn for the digital summit, and where also the future of Europe will be discussed. How do you and the Estonian presidency want to deal with these aforementioned issues and crises during your presidency, and how can the Estonian presidency make a difference, or maybe even a game changer in some of the fields? Big task in 6 months.
Well, I wouldn't be overly ambitious. I mean, the EU will hopefully go on for quite considerable time, and there will be a lot of work left for the Bulgarian presidency and the Austrian presidency and the ones that come after those. So yes, we will definitely not be able to resolve all the outstanding issues that lie ahead us today, but we want to make a strong impact. Obviously, there's the Brexit negotiation looming in the background that will grab a lot of attention and a lot of headlines during the coming months. There's also the ongoing migration situation, There are seasonal fluctuations when it comes to the numbers of migrants making it to Europe, but the situation definitely has not been resolved for good, and we will have to cope with the effects of that and mitigate the negative effects and also be able to deal with the internal political implications in many of the EU member states. We have put the security of Europe, both internal and external, and the two are increasingly indivisible, are very high on our agenda for the presidency. So when it comes to external security, we want to take the EU-NATO cooperation forward. We want to deal very seriously with the EU defense cooperation. We've seen very significant developments during the past couple of months in that regard. When it comes to internal security, then obviously we want to deal with the defense of EU's external borders, but also with the root causes of the migration crisis by way of coming to agreement regarding the future development cooperation that the EU does with the countries on the African continent, so as to give more opportunity to the young generation in Africa. We have in addition to the digital summit in Tallinn, we have the EU African Union summit coming up in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire in November, focusing particularly on the young generation and the economic opportunities for generating economic opportunities for the young generation in Africa. We also have the EU Eastern Partnership Summit coming up in Brussels in November, which will focus on how to take forward the cooperation of the European Union with the countries to its east, Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, as well as Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus. Obviously a very diverse bunch of partners. So we have quite a full agenda when it comes to foreign policy issues, but obviously we also have to deal with a lot of files on the socio-economic agenda. And also on the background of one of the larger member states about to leave, we will have to advance the discussion regarding the institutional, but also the sort of conceptual future of the European project. So it's quite a full plate. We will hopefully make a significant mark. We will definitely want to see that some of our horizontal priorities, be it the Eastern Partnership, or also the digital agenda, the digital single market, free movement of information, we want to make sure that they will not fall off the table once we conclude our presidency. That's already a success, I think, if we manage to keep them on the table for the presidencies to come.
Wow, that's a lot of work to do. I'm quite impressed. Agne, from the perspective of the young generation, what should be the key tasks of the EU? The minister mentioned quite a lot. Maybe you have some other tasks which should be tackled by the EU, which were not mentioned yet.
Actually, I want to go back to Mrs. President's letter that she received, and I want to say that in Lithuania, even right now, we encounter very same views from the young people that somebody else has to do something for me, and it's not me who is capable of reaching for the change, right? And because right now, among the youngsters, we don't have that many young people participating in NGO sector, participating in a political organization. So it seems like young people don't believe that they have the tools to reach for a change or to implement the change. And my wish for EU would be start more investing in education. Of course, we love those investments that have been made to nice roads and nice buildings, but what we lack is the investment in education, educating our people to have tools for themselves to reach the change among the local communities, among the national communities, and then gather together and reach for the change in the EU level.
So more funding for educational programs, for exchange programs, and
Yes, education.
Education.
That's the key for everything.
That's true, key for everything. And well, Kurt Beck mentioned that we have got a study made in 8 European countries, and there was also the question, what are the key tasks, the most important tasks? And I was a little bit surprised that, well, the first task was the most important task was refugee policy. More than half of the people said, well, it's the most important task the EU has to tackle, but just 9% said to reduce social inequalities. Shouldn't that be a bigger task of the EU, reducing social inequality?
Well, I think that you cannot. Well, some issues are short-term acute crises, and while others are sort of longer-term things that you have to work with over many years and potentially decades. And well, there's this sort of false dichotomy sometimes, basically asking whether we should focus at this point on sort of fighting the war or building resilience in the society. I mean, if you are under attack, you have to do both simultaneously, and also we will have to do both simultaneously. Obviously, the European project, to a large extent, is about bringing everyone to a roughly sort of similar standard of living. So that's the best way to not everyone, obviously. I mean, we are not about to introduce communism, but basically the idea is that if there are significant differences in the level of development between different countries and different social groups and strata, and so that increases, builds up tensions in the societies, and then these inevitably lead to conflicts. So if we want to avoid another sort of potentially detrimental conflict on the European continent, we have to help those who have fallen behind to catch up, and that's what the EU is about. Obviously, there are different perspectives. We have net payers and net receivers when it comes to member states today, and in order for those who have fallen behind because, well, for example, having had to live under foreign domination or occupation for decades, well, they believe that they have a certain competitive edge in having sort of cheaper labor, for example, and lower standards of social security, which are also less costly for the governments, and so unnaturally sometimes those net payers want to harmonize those standards, but that would probably imply having to pay more into this common budget. So it's sort of circular arguments sometimes. But these different perspectives become manifest when we discuss the future of how we arrange this, how we reform this common European project. So we have to absolutely have to deal with that. But that doesn't mean that we should sort of put it higher on the list of priorities than dealing with the sort of ongoing refugee situation. We will have to basically, when the house is on fire, you also have to deal with this immediate crisis, and at the same time, obviously, you have to do many other things.
But here in the Baltic states, is the house really on fire with the refugee crisis? I would say it's on fire with the social crisis.
No, not really, but basically, I can fully understand why these countries that are more immediately affected by the refugee crisis expect some solidarity also from us. So that's, I mean, and I think that if the Italians feel that they're having to bear an inequitably large share of the burden, then if they feel that Europe has left them alone, or if I don't know, the Greeks feel that way, then obviously it has an effect on the overall cohesion of the union and political cohesion, and that will lead to loss of consensus on many other issues, which perhaps are of very, very immediate concern for us. For example, in the area of health security. So I think that there is a very direct link between those things, and I mean, we have benefited quite a lot from the solidarity of our European partners, be it by way of receiving structural funds money, or by receiving the allied military contingents that have come to our countries as way of as a part of this NATO enhanced forward presence. So obviously, I mean, we cannot ignore the plight of our partners, even if those concerns do not immediately sort of affect us.
I'm sorry if I'm going to make a little bit of topic issue hopping because we have not that many time, but I want to speak about another aspect about trust. The EU has politics a lot about trust, and the EU has lost the trust of many people, although Beck said it's regaining a little bit of trust. But, Madam President, what should the EU do that the people trust more?
Trust has to be earned. It's not something that you can buy, and only totalitarian systems will insist not just on trust from their citizens, but love for the supreme leader and total obedience and so on and so forth. In a free society where people are free to think and feel whatever they wish, I think gaining trust is a real challenge for business when they present you your products. For instance, Eastern Europeans discovered to their surprise that when they were buying known brand names of various products, they were being sold second-grade merchandise under the very same name, and I think with the same price as Western Europeans, and they were appalled to discover that they were being cheated all the time just because they were Eastern Europeans, and some Western companies thought they wouldn't know any better. That of course is rather undermines one's trust in the business ethics of countries that have proudly been saying how open and democratic and how deep and strong their traditions and their accomplishments are. Whenever this happens, it's a shock. When you get a president of the European Commission caught at having given a position, I forget whether it was her lover or her dentist or both or something of that sort, when in fact he was continuing to do both, you see, and not the job that he was registered and being paid for. I think the citizen may be forgiven for losing trust in politicians, at least certainly that particular politician, but also generally it sort of undermines your thing. So trust, you see, it's a strange thing. Individually it has to be earned, but it has to be earned collectively. We trust our doctors, do we? When we get help and are healed, we're most grateful, and our trust in doctors goes up. If something goes wrong, our trust in doctors goes down, and so on, for business, for politics, for everything else. I think we've had a sort of wake-up call after the financial crisis that, for instance, there used to be a saying that this is as safe as being in the bank. And then all of a sudden you discover that the least safe thing you can have is put your money in the bank. You'd much better keeping it in your sock or under your mattress. You can't trust banks. Well, that's very disappointing. You think about equality, democracy leading to equality. And then you look at the Gini indices across the world, and you notice that not just in democratic Europe, but in democratic United States, the rich are getting richer, and the poor are remaining as poor as they were, and the middle class is sort of frittering away. And if you see that, I forget what percent, 90% of the world's riches is in the hands of 1% of its population, that's simply appalling. when you start looking at these figures, your hair stands up on end, and you say, hey, communism is dead and good riddance to it, but frankly, capitalism seems to have some kind of fatal disease as well. And how long can we go on with that sort of system? So, you see, it's all very well to say, we're lacking trust, as if it was a flower that we could go out and pluck and put in our buttonhole. It is not. It's something that has to be earned, and has to be earned by very hard and honest work.
And it's quite easy to lose trust, but really hard to gain it. Well, I wanted also to speak about Euroscepticism, because while the loss of trust maybe in the EU results also in Euroscepticism, which is also a topic here in the Baltic states, and also because we just, as FES, published a quite interesting study on Euroscepticism in all 3 Baltic states. But in regard to the time, I've got to skip this topic and just want to make a little bit of publicity, because in 2 weeks' time we're going to present this study on Euroscepticism in the Baltic states. But before I open the panel to your questions, one more last question to you, Minister. On the one hand, we have the support for right-wing populist parties all over Europe, and on the other hand, we see authoritarian tendency in some eastern countries, especially Poland and Hungary. What could be the role of the Baltic states, leading these states back to an understanding of Europe as in Europe based on solidarity, and that solidarity is not a one-way road with a permission of cherry-picking?
Well, I think that this polarization of politics is a nearly universal phenomenon, and it has to do with the perhaps with a shrinking middle class in some on some occasions. It also has to do, I think, a lot with the very dramatic transformation that we are seeing in the way that information is being spread. I mean, the information landscape has dramatically transformed, not in a matter of decades, but in a matter of years. And I think that we have been somewhat less successful in coping with that dramatic change than some of the more malevolent players we believe, and rightly so, that ultimately truth prevails, and we are actually quite vulnerable to sort of these malicious information campaigns and spreading of half-truths and untruths by those who want to discredit the liberal democracy. And I think we have to give some very serious thought as to how we address this issue, because it's a very asymmetrical playing field. We cannot fight lies with lies of our own, but we have to be creative in putting those who spread lies on the defensive. Because when we are on the defensive, trying to explain something that is naturally complex and complicated, such as the European Union. I mean, it's a unique organization of 28 sovereign states that actually run a single market and space of free movement of people and money and services and goods. I mean, it cannot be so simple as to be explained in 2 sentences. Just naturally, it isn't. But lies, I mean, it's to tell a lie, it doesn't take more than 2 sentences. And then if we try to respond by explaining the world in all its complexity, then obviously, I mean, with the very limited attention span that people have today, we are on the defensive, and it's going to be very difficult for us to win. But I mean, I very much, coming to your question, I very much believe in leading by example. I think that we have been relatively successful in actually catching up with the so-called old Europe, also with the sort of sticking to the liberal democracy and the basic values that the foundations of the European Union. We do enjoy very strong support for the European project in all of our countries. I mean, in Estonia, since we took the referendum back in 2003 about joining the EU, the support for the idea of joining back then was 66%, and it's been at that level or above that level ever since. Even through all the crises, even through the economic crisis and the financial crisis. So, well, obviously, I mean, everyone's responsible every government is responsible, first of all, for communicating the important issues to its own people. I don't think that it's a very good idea to go and try to as Estonians, as Germans or French or Dutch, go to try to speak to the citizens of another EU country that their government is wrong. That's probably not a very constructive approach, but I very much believe in leading by example.
Thank you. I would like to open now the discussion and would like to invite you to participate or to give comments and address questions to our panelists. I have the first hand seen here. I think we're going to collect some questions. Who else? 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Yes, I was Collins from the Latvian Parliament. 28 years ago, the 3 Baltic states joined hands, formed the Baltic Way. We got the attention of the world because we did something that nobody had ever done before. We're on the verge of creating Rail Baltic, which also will be a precedent-setting form of cooperation. Over the last 25 years, each of our countries has tried to establish our own identities, but recognized that it's important to work together. My question is about the future of the European Union. Do the Baltic states share a common vision about where the European Union should go and our place in it, at least in your opinion and your experience?
Another member of Latvian Parliament. My name is Sergejs Patapkins, and I want to ask about European perspectives, so we can talk about the unity, like Baltic unity, European Union unity, but we all know that we need a strong leader sometimes, and the strongest leader for last decades was European leader for last decades was United States. But now we see after the America First policy, United States are busy with their internal and situational problems, and thanks to our host Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, I would say my personal opinion that Germany has a chance to become a European Union leader. So I would ask the panelists, so are we, the Baltic states, ready to accept Germany as a new European leader?
Okay, one more question.
A former member of Lithuanian Parliament. I'm afraid that more and more people are voting for populists and far rights. And for the young people, good education also doesn't guarantee the job place. Social division, the gap between rich and poor, it's constantly increasing. Digitalization, robotization of economy also leads to increasing this gap. So my question is, maybe these thinkers from Ebert-Stiftung, other people, I think we should, wise people should find the ways how to distribute public goods, how to invent new strategy for economy with human face. Otherwise, the traditional political parties, they lose the credibility of the voters in Europe and in the entire world.
Thank you. We maybe start with these questions. We had the question also on the common vision of Europe and the question of the acceptance of a German leadership in the European Union. Who wants to start? Who wants to answer?
We understand that in a democratic system, everybody has the same rights. And that is the fundamental principle, that none are privileged by birth, by ancestry, or by skin color or religion or anything else. But that does not mean that we are all equal and the same in the way we are, in the way we think. And you see, this is sometimes a nuance that we forget. We have the same rights and frequently the same aspirations for those rights. But we may have chosen different paths of how to reach them. That's why we have multi-party systems in democracies. In totalitarian systems, either the leading party or more likely the leader decides what's what and tells people what's what, and that's it, and everybody's happy. And if they're not happy, well, they better watch out, because that is an obligation in a totalitarian system. You have to be happy with it. Democratic systems allow you to be unhappy with the situation and to express your unhappiness if you so feel. It's a great privilege, you see. You want to be unhappy, and okay, go ahead, you can do it. You don't have to sing the praises of saying, oh, the European Union is the most wonderful thing that was created, and so on. Actually, I happen to think so, you see. And I think many people do. I think it was a remarkable project. I think it was an extraordinary accomplishment. The integration of the 10 new countries in 2004 was a remarkable step forward for the unification of Europe. But no, I could not write back to my Spanish Latvian correspondent that we've fixed everything and everything is perfect. We all have still work to do, young or old, or middle-aged. Each of us in our own way, and each of in our own individuality as individuals or as members of different nations. I think that, yes, our diversity is part of our identity. What we have to contribute to each other is the fact that we accept who we are, but that means we also accept others. I think it's the mutual acceptance that is the hic here. Many people have difficulty accepting themselves. I say this as a psychologist who worked some time in a clinic. It's the greatest problem of many people is that they do not love themselves and they do not accept themselves, and because of that they hate the world, because actually they are unable of feeling a sense of acceptance and goodwill and so forth. We will never be all like peas in a pod. We shouldn't be. We shouldn't want to be. But we should be agreed on certain basic principles. And I think those are the ones that Schuman and Monnet enunciated. Those are the ones that we continue to reiterate and to rephrase with every new commission, a new parliament, every new government gets elected. We have to do that. We have to reiterate all the time what we stand for, and that is our common thing. At the same time, we should not even want to be all the same. It would be hideously boring.
Thank you. It remains a question to the German leadership. And
yeah, about the other leadership and what they teach us at university, to be prepared to take a leadership in your own hands. So I kind of see EU as where Baltic states has shared leadership, where they use the strengthness and add to the leadership from our side. So it's a shared leadership. So that's how I see EU, where Baltic states are one of the leaders.
Minister.
Well, first, to your question, well, I haven't seen any dramatic differences between the Baltic states' approach to the future of Europe. I mean, I think that if we fail to reach an agreement between the 28 or 27, then it's not because of differences between the Baltic countries. It's not going to be that. And the question about German leadership, well, I think Germany already has to shoulder a lot of the responsibility for the future of Europe and for the current condition of Europe. And obviously, it's a collective leadership. It's not just for the Germans, and we shouldn't be telling the Germans that, well, you have to take the lead, and then everyone else will wait until you come up with a decision and then will follow. That's not going to happen, and I don't think that if Germans are reluctant to do that, I think. Justifiably so, but obviously they as the largest of the member states, they I think feel the responsibility, the enormous responsibility that they bear, and we should make sure that they will not tremble and shake under that burden. As to the well, obviously we as progressives should how should I say? Should deliver the message to and spread the idea that sort of things like, for example, universal access to healthcare, that it's a good thing for the whole of the society. That even if I am lucky enough to live a completely healthy life and die at the age of 110. I mean, it's still good for me and my family and my children if my neighbors also have access to healthcare, and same with education. So I think that these are things that we need to promote here in Europe, but also beyond Europe. We are in a slightly different situation from the US, which is essentially a sort of immigrant nation, and one that still sort of people want to. Well, basically it draws on the pool of potential immigrants, even with a current travel ban. But here in Europe, with the sort of countries with aging populations and the challenges sort of rising from that, I think that we have come quite a long way in understanding how important it is to actually not only preach solidarity but also practice it.
Thank you. We have a brief second round. I've seen Ms. Steinbucher, then Mr. Rumczyk, and the third question here. So the three final questions. Madame Steinbucher.
First, I'm very grateful for organizer and to Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung for organizing this very topical discussion after 2 weeks. 2 weeks after the speech of the Jean-Claude Juncker, President of the European Commission, in front of the European Parliament. He presented his vision of the European future, and we have a lot of discussion also in the Baltic states, in Latvia. But after him, President Macron presented his vision of the future, and it goes even far beyond European Commission President. And my question is, what is your immediate reaction to the speech of President Macron? Because the previous question was about the potential German leadership. But it seems to me that for the time being, France is trying to keep this initiative for the European future. So what is your reaction? Do you find his vision of the European future realistic? What can be taken on board?
Very good old German guy. It's a little bit touchy to ask about leadership, German leadership, especially after 700 years of German influence in the area. But I skip that. I like to make use of the fact that the foreign minister of Estonia is representing a country that is bridging into the Scandinavian area. And my question is going that way, asking if the lack of European identity, what you more or less made very clear with your explanations, north-south splitting and all that. If including a little bit more the Scandinavian experiences, political, social, ecological, and all that, could help to stimulate and to stir up the European perspectives for a kind of new Europe that is more cohesive and more comprehensive. Question. That was my question. Okay?
And the last question. Okay.
Krista Baumane from the think tank Providus. I have a question about migration. It is obviously a European issue. It has become a very sensitive issue before elections. In European countries, it will come up next year in Latvia. And I would like to ask all three panelists, what is your view from your perspective? What should the goals of migration policy in the Baltic countries be?
Okay, three very short questions, and we could have very long answers. Should the EU become more French? Should the EU become more Scandinavian? And how are we going to deal with the migrants and the refugees? I would say every panelist has about 1 minute for one answer. Who wants to start? Nobody. Minister.
I can try. First about the proposals by President Juncker and President Macron. Well, first of all, I think that you should have sort of ambitious visions when you start a discussion about the future. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be sort of the point of departure shouldn't be a sort of very conservative, realistic vision. I think that you should be ambitious. There are certain limits as to how far you can go, how fast. And the thing that we will come to, we'll probably have to climb down a bit from those very ambitious visions when it comes to the implementation. The ideas, for example, about the Eurozone governance, I mean, these been floated by the French well before Macron was elected president, and you have to discuss these issues because obviously the Euro crisis points out that there's something missing from the monetary union. I mean, there's the political project that is not fully backed up by the monetary and fiscal policies. When it comes to Scandinavian, or the cooperation with the Scandinavian countries, then, well, actually within the European Union, obviously we do not want to see a multi-speed Europe. When we see that we cannot avoid moving at different speeds, then at least the Estonian natural instinct is to be among the core, but we definitely would like to see a Europe that moves roughly at the same speed on all main issues. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't cooperate regarding certain policy areas or issues, also in smaller regional groups. We have very good cooperation among the 3 Baltic countries, also very good cooperation among the NB8. The Nordic 5 have their own formats of cooperation. Obviously, there are 2 countries that do not belong to the European Union among those 5 Nordics. But so, I mean, I don't see them as sort of competing things, not at all. And the final question was?
Migration.
Well, that's an easy one. But basically, I would say that obviously, when it comes to people who are fleeing crises, be it wars, man-made crises, or natural disaster areas, then helping those people is a sort of humanitarian imperative. We as Europeans, we will have to do that. That having been said, obviously we'll also have to fight illegal migration and the criminal gangs that actually benefit financially from people smuggling. So there are many sides to that issue. But people have been moving. I mean, it would be totally unrealistic to think that for hundreds of thousands of years people have migrated in search of better life, and now by the year 1945. 1995 or by the year 1991, all the people were at the place where they were supposed to be, and they would not move anymore. I mean, our people have been moving to other EU countries in search of better life, economic opportunity, in huge numbers sometimes. So we should not say that those people who come to Europe in search of better life are evil. I mean, that's totally stupid, I would say. Not to use a nastier word. But obviously, I mean, we should also address the illegal immigration, and we should pay very serious attention to securing Europe's external borders in order to be able to maintain free movement of people and goods and services and everything else internally within the EU borders.
Minister, thank you for being that clear on migration. Agne, Scandinavian, French migration, can pick one.
Maybe immigration. I can relate to what you were saying about immigration and how it affects the upcoming elections, because we encountered the same problem where the people is asking the party that was before in charge, where are our people and why are they not coming back, and why everybody has less job because the schools are closing, there's not enough students, there's not enough people to cure for doctors, and then I don't have an answer for that, because Europe opens the door for us and they give us huge opportunities to reach for a better life somewhere, and it doesn't actually give us the tools to bring them back. But as a minister said, it's not an evil thing to want a better life. It's just we have to explain to people that it is just something that 21st century and being in EU offers us, and it's very natural.
Madam President, we started with you. You can close our panel discussion.
Again, with the last question about migration, we mustn't confuse the different sorts of movements of populations. And truly, you're quite right. They have been going on through history, and they're never going to stop. We have to be aware of that. When our ancestors were serfs in their own land, they were tied to the land. When we were under Soviet occupation, going even to East Germany was a privilege that would often cost you to sign up to be a secret informer, if not a secret agent of the KGB. So that having the Iron Curtain disappear, having the opportunity to freely travel across the continent and to both to receive people and to go anywhere else. And I meet everywhere people say, I've been to Riga recently. It's no big deal. And yes, Latvians both travel for pleasure and move to work elsewhere. The influx of, by the way, I was just in London and I was asking personnel the thing to put a suitcase on, and the girl who came in looked at me and said, I don't understand what you want. And from her accent, I had a feeling where she was from. I said, yo lo que quería era algo para poner mis maletas porque es difícil para mí ponerlas en eso. Ah, sí. Then she understood. Years ago, when I used to travel to Europe as a tourist from Canada, I would find the same problem in a restaurant in Great Britain. The servers were Portuguese, who had not yet learned English either. You see, this sort of thing goes on. The Portuguese countryside, which was depopulated by people moving to say, serving in a service industry in France or in Great Britain, it is Ukrainians now who till the soil in large parts of Portugal and so on. This has been going on through history. It is perfectly natural, and the local population will absorb and adjust to it. The influx that we had a few years ago was absolutely abnormal, and I do believe that traffickers, see, human traffic in drugs and traffic in human beings are the two biggest money makers in the world today, apart from financial markets. And that human traffickers and their programs and possibly some political manipulations were responsible for this absolutely abnormal influx of refugees at one time. This, to me, is a situation of exception. The long-term situation of receiving refugees in Europe is that they have to be filtered for elements that are inimical to the European way of life or a danger to them. They have to be provided with opportunities of being inserted in society, and we have to respect their choice as to where they want to go. We did accept refugees in Latvia and in Lithuania, and what happened? The first chance they had, they left. Why? Because the social services that we can offer them, the social guarantees, are not as high as those that you get in Germany or in Sweden. It's very simple. It's like water seeking the same level. You can't blame them for wishing to go where they have better opportunities. And I think it's very hypocritical, this business of reproaching a lack of solidarity to Eastern Europeans. It's the refugees themselves who actually would rather go to the richer countries than to the ones that they consider poor. As far, I think that the motor of Europe has been considered always to be Germany and France together. I had an occasion some years ago to be invited to an event in France where Chancellor Mörschel was invited by President Sarkozy, and they were telling about how deep the enmity had been between the two nations. Mr. Sarkozy said, "My grandfather never said the word German. He always called them Bosch, and swore he would never set foot in Germany." But then Mrs. Merkel kissed Mr. Sarkozy on the cheek, and then Mr. Sarkozy kissed Mrs. Merkel on the cheek, and I happened to be standing there, and both of them kissed me on the cheeks. And I think that that's the sort of thing that where old enmities can be laid aside, that is the basis of the European Union. And yes, the newcomers do have their place in there, and I think, yes, they can get kissed on the cheek by, with either side. And this is the sort of relationship, I think, that we're looking forward in a future. And it is rather populistic to try and pick up certain elements that would simply try and make us feel antagonistic towards each other. I think we have much more in common, and that it is a much more joyful thing to feel what we have in common than to be sitting there grousing about what it is that divides us.
Thank you very much. They were wonderful final words. Ladies and gentlemen, on the invitation to our today's discussion, we can see the skyline of Tallinn, Riga, and Vilnius. And put together in this way, they resemble a little bit a ECG recording. Not very regular, but in this case, I would say very beautiful. And I'm happy to say that our discussion tonight, that what we can see there is the pulse of Europe. And despite all the challenges the EU is facing at the moment, we can also say that a strong European heart is beating here in the Baltic states, and we are very thankful and grateful for that. Thank you very much to our panelists. I think they deserve a big applause.